pick up where Sarah ended, Part 2 of our report contains an array of potential budget savings and revenue-raising options to help address the county's structural budget challenge going forward. Before Craig briefs you on the contents of the issue papers, I will briefly review the factors that guided OLO's selection of options. For starters, we were guided by research into how other jurisdictions are addressing their own structural imbalances, because, as I said earlier, the cost pressures and difficult trade-offs facing Montgomery County are by no means unique. We were also guided by the advice of subject matter experts and placed priority on exploring options that have the potential for reducing substantial and recurring savings. The options all adhere to legal guidance we received from the county attorney, and the report focuses on reforms that would reduce per-employee costs. We also went out of our way not to duplicate the work of other initiatives, such as the Organizational Reform Commission, which reported to the council yesterday. Recognizing that dollars spent on paying debt service are not available to fund agency operating costs, the report includes an issue paper that quantifies options for reducing the county's debt going forward. And finally, while the bulk of our report provides options that would reduce spending, we recognize that raising additional revenue is an alternative and address potential options to do so. The report is organized into 8 issue papers, which are listed on this slide. And now, here's Craig to delve a bit deeper into the contents of a few of these papers.
What I will do over the next few minutes is to show 4 examples of the many options in the report, one from each of the issue papers remaining on the screen. For each of the options we discuss, as well as the options we are not going to go through as part of this presentation, I want to emphasize that there is much more detail in the written report than we will describe today. The first option example is from the employee salaries issue paper and is a salary rollback in fiscal year 12. A salary rollback is a permanent reduction to an employee's base salary. As shown by the table on this slide, this option could achieve savings of about $23 million for every 1% rollback if applied to all agency employees. This next slide takes a look at one of the options related to health benefits for active employees, changing to a 70-30 cost share, which would reduce the portion of health insurance premiums paid by each agency by shifting more of the cost to employees. We're going to show 2 different models for implementing this option. And as you can see on the slide, there's a significant difference between the fiscal year 2012 savings associated with each model. First, though, this next slide summarizes the current cost share arrangements for the majority of employees in each agency, as each agency determines the health plans it offers to employees and the cost share associated with each. MCPS currently pays the largest portion of employee insurance premiums, 90 to 95%, while Montgomery College pays the smallest portion, 75%. If all agencies reduced their cost share to 70% of the premium, they would achieve substantial savings. The largest amount of savings would come from MCPS, both because of the size of its workforce and because MCPS would experience the largest change in cost share. We will now show you a graph of how the cost curve for health benefits would change under this 70-30 option. This first red line shows the 6-year projection for agency healthcare costs under the current cost share arrangements. The yellow line shows the cost curve associated with the 70-30 cost share implemented on January 1st, 2012, which is halfway through the next fiscal year. Compared to the current cost share, the savings would be an estimated $35 million in fiscal year 12, and twice that, $73 million in fiscal year 13, the first full year of implementation. The second implementation model, illustrated by the green line, is to phase in the cost share change at a 5% change each year. This phase-in model would yield lower savings in the short term, about $10 million in fiscal year 12, but would reach the same level of savings by the end of fiscal year 16, when all the agencies would have reached the same cost share. Before we go through an example from the Retirement and Pension Benefits issue paper, I want to briefly explain the difference between defined benefit and defined contribution retirement plans. Defined benefit plans, often referred to as pension plans, pay a retiree a set monthly amount from retirement until death based on a formula established by the employer. Defined contribution plans are like 401k plans, where an employee and an employer contribute a set percent of salary to a retirement account, and the employee is responsible for investing those funds. Now, why is this important to Montgomery County? Because most employees, approximately 88% across the 4 agencies in total, belong to the substantially more expensive defined benefit plans. One retirement option from the report is to enroll all new county government employees in a defined contribution plan. This option would actually extend the action the County Council took in 1994 when it closed the defined benefit plan to certain groups of employees. While this particular example is specific to county government only, the report includes a similar option for MCPS, and this type of structural change could be applied to the other agencies as well. This next slide shows how much the county government has contributed annually to fund the defined benefit plan, the area in green on the bottom, compared to the defined contribution plan, the area in yellow. In fiscal year 2011, while the defined benefit plan has roughly the same number of members as the defined contribution plan, the county government will spend 7.5 times as much to fund the defined benefit plan. While an actuarial analysis is required to determine the specific amount of savings under this option, we can tell you that if all current county government employees were in a defined contribution plan today, the county's FY 2011 retirement costs would have been approximately $77 million less. The last option I want to spend a couple minutes on is workforce size reduction. That is, reducing the number of people on the county payroll. Reducing workforce size is an option to reduce personnel costs, although we again remind you that the primary personnel cost driver over the past decade has been higher costs per employee as opposed to a large growth in the workforce. And of course, a decision to reduce the workforce would necessitate corresponding reductions in service delivery. To provide some perspective on this, this next slide shows the average salary and benefits cost per work year and the resulting number of work years that would need to be reduced for every $10 million in savings in each agency. The data indicate that between 89 and 153 positions would need to be abolished for each increment of $10 million in savings. To take this one step further, this last slide provides some illustrative examples of what $10 million in work years represents in each agency based on the average cost data you just saw. We want to be clear that the examples listed on this slide are not offered as recommendations for reduction, but rather to illustrate in a tangible way what an increment of $10 million in work years can buy in each agency. For example, in county government, $10 million represents 100% of the career firefighters assigned to the Silver Spring No. 1, Kensington No. 18, and Gaithersburg No. 28 fire stations combined. In MCPS, $10 million represents 85% of all elementary school music teachers. In Montgomery College, $10 million represents 25% of all instructional faculty across all 3 of the college's campuses. And in Park and Planning, $10 million represents the entire Park Police Division. Your handout includes tables that summarize the potential savings and/or revenue associated with each of the options in the report, a table with additional illustrative examples of what $10 million in work years represents in each agency, and the web address where you can access the entire report online.